name is David Kenny, and I preach for the Wadsworth Church of Christ on Westgood Avenue. I thought before we began our next series of lessons, I wanted to share with you this new correspondence course, and I'll put it to this camera where they can zoom in on it for you and get you a little closer shot of it. And I'll open up some of the pages so you can get an idea what it looks like inside. And this first lesson is called the Introduction to the Bible, and it gives you, it's really nicely well done, a lot of good overview information. And on the back page, right here on this particular one, there's a quiz, and it's based on all the information that's within the correspondence course and the passages in the Bible they have you look up. And you fill that out and you mail it back to us, and we'll grade it, and we'll mail you your quiz back to let you know how you did, and we'll send you the next lesson. And the church in Wadsworth on Good Avenue, they provide that to you for free. So I'll ask them to put up the address where you can contact that information. You can contact us either by writing to us if you want, or if you want to call, that's fine too. We'll obviously need a name and an address where to send that to. So we're very pleased with these new courses and hope that you'll take advantage of them. In this series of lessons, we want to continue our apologetics theme. And we're talking about the idea of, does the Bible have evidence that proves that it's just not some other book? And today our topic is proof for the inspiration of the Bible based on scientific foreknowledge. And that's what we're going to look at. Does the Bible contradict or confirm science? And how would these Bible writers be able to accomplish so much scientific accuracy? So there's really two things going on. One is, do they contradict? And they don't. But the more important thing to keep in mind when you're talking about this is, how did these writers, and we talked about that through the last series of lessons, how did these writers who wrote, thousands, 3,000, 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, how did they know these scientific facts? And that's what we're going to talk about this time. But first of all, we need to point out, the Bible is not a science textbook. And I just want to make sure that that you realize that I'm aware of that. Some quickly shout out, the Bible is not a science textbook, and we realize that. And while that's correct on one level, they fail to realize, or perhaps they refuse to examine the evidence, that the Bible does speak on matters which touches several scientific disciplines. For example, astronomy, oceanography, biology, anthropology, geology, and on and on. And the fact remains that while the Bible is not a book of science, when it speaks about scientific matters, it does so accurately. And that's important to note. That's critical. And it's not that way in other respected writings of different civilizations. And we could spend, I don't know how many episodes we could talk about all the different things that was thought that was prevalent of the day, that science had come along and just said, well, that's just silly. Matter of fact, you wouldn't need science to tell you that now. Any person on the street would tell you, well, that's not going to work. But back in ancient times, people had different beliefs. But what did the Bible say? What did the Bible always say? And what can we learn from it? What I want to do is take a look at this next slide here. The science and the Bible, they harmonize. And I'm going to put up this that book right here. I'll give you a little closer shot of that book by Wayne Jackson. I brought it in so you can see my copy of it as soon as you can zoom in. And that's, it's a paperback book, used to the reverse angle. It's not real thick. It's a real nice book. And it's called The Bible and Science by Wayne Jackson. And in here, in his table of contents, he really goes through and he talks about a lot of these disciplines like astronomy, oceanography, geology, biology, anthropology, and others. And he goes through there and he looks at these different disciplines, and he's pointing out, does the Bible and science, do they harmonize or they contradict? And that's what it is. And here's a statement he makes on pages 14 and 15. He says, it is an amazing fact that though it was completed some 20 centuries ago, the biblical record is always consistent with the discoveries of science. This certainly cannot be said of any modern textbook dealing with scientific issues. Current science books will be obsolete within a very brief time. And we know that to be true. I had to take several courses on science, and these science books, I always had to get a new book. And we know that to be true. We have the phone number up there if you're interested in the book, where you can order it from. That doesn't come to us. but I thought maybe you might find that book interesting, so I thought I'd bring the number up, and so if you wanted to know where to get it, you could. But let's go on and take a look at an example. And this is a little bit of a lengthy quote, but it illustrates the purpose well. And this deals with Aristotle. And what did Aristotle, think about certain matters? Now, Aristotle was an intelligent person. I'm not minimizing that at all. But he wasn't an inspired writer. And it's really important to note. And here's a lengthy quote. And I'd like to go and read all of it, but we don't have time for that. But I thought I'd put it up there, and you could sort of freeze the frame and read it at your leisure some other time. But he points out that Aristotle thought the brain was basically a radiator for the heart, that it basically regulated temperature. If your body got too hot, then your brain would cool it down, and vice versa. He really didn't understand that the brain was the center of intellect, that it was a part of the central nervous system, and he didn't know that. But the Bible doesn't make those kinds of mistakes. But yet another prominent philosopher, Ayn Rand, she heralds Aristotle, with great words of praise. She said about him, at the root of every civilized achievement, such as science, technology, progress, freedom, at the root of every value we enjoy today, including the birth of this country, you will find the achievement of one man who lived over 2,000 years ago. And she should say Jesus right here, but that's not who she says. She says Aristotle. And Aristotle was a smart man. I'm not trying to take that away from him, but he was not infallible. He was not inspired. He had scientific inaccuracies in his writings, but the Bible does not. And that's what we're talking about today. Talking about having to revise modern science books, take a look at this book here called The Biography of the Earth. I got this from that book I showed you a second ago from the Bible and Science. He talks about it, and he says, renowned physicist George Garmon published a second edition to Biography of the Earth, and notice which included a special preface to correct all the errors of the first edition, because many changes have taken place, including the past 7 years, and our ideas concerning the origin of the planetary system. Now, not to pick on these people, but we just can't let these things go by. The question is, if what scientists are telling you is a scientific fact, facts don't change. And if they come around and they later say, well, we're revising the scientific facts, well, no, that's not the way it works. They may revise their theories, but the facts remain. See, that's the thing. Not all scientists do this, but some scientists just want to say, well, you're arguing with scientific fact if you don't agree with our theory. And that's just not the case. And we need to be reminded of that. We live in exciting times of scientific advancement. Sometimes science wants to take us into areas that maybe they conflict with some people's morality. But that aside, we are impressed with the things scientists are able to learn about God's creation and what they're able to do to help us, and that's great. Intelligent design, the intelligent design movement, really, that idea has been around for a long time. The idea that, take for example, I have my pen here, right here. Here's my pen. And, if I drop this somewhere, hopefully you'll give it back to me, but if I drop it and you picked it up, you wouldn't say, well, this just came up out of the ground from nowhere, that it just appeared. You would know that, well, it's got the cross's name on it. You would know that, well, maybe that's the person's name or something like that, but you would recognize there's design there, there's complexity there. Somebody made this pen. It just didn't happen that way. And if you take something like that and then you compare it with the cell phone, mine's not even all that sophisticated, but there's a lot of sophistication in these two things. A lot more with the cell phone than there is the pen. But the interesting thing is we recognize that there's a lot more knowledge that went into the cell phone than is required for the pen. And scientists, they keep digging and digging and digging into things like, take for example, the human genome, the DNA. They keep finding out more and more information, which is fantastic. I mean, it's very interesting what they learn. But one of the things that always impresses me is every time they continue to dig deeper, they find that things are far more complex and designed intricately than they even realized. And that should really tell them something. I mean, I don't understand how they missed that point. The more they go, the deeper they get, some of the evolutionary scientists, they become more firmly entrenched. But really, you got to think about, if there is intelligent design there, that demands a designer. That's an old argument, but it's still just as valid today. The intelligence of a design requires a designer. At some point in time, you have to ask yourself, when are they going to realize that? I don't know, but hopefully soon. Let's take a look at a more structured, logically arranged argument that talk about the inspiration here. We'll put that up here. Let's just read through this together. It's similar to the one we had on the writers of the Bible, but it deals more with the scientific proof. It says, if it is the case that the Bible reveals scientific facts about the universe, earth, nature, and the body beyond the writer's ability to realize alone, then that writer has been revealed facts from a mind greater than their mind, in other words, the divine mind, which is God. Well, number two, it is the case that the writers of the Bible reveal certain scientific facts about the universe, earth, nature, and the body that were beyond the writer's ability to realize alone. So then, number three, therefore the Bible is the work of the divine mind, and that divine mind being God. So that's what we're talking about. This argument about, these writers had this information that they wrote about that they couldn't have possibly known to be true. And some of these examples have been around for a long time, and some people say, well, that's just old information, but it doesn't change the facts. It doesn't change the proof. And let's just look at some of these together, and we'll do this for this episode and maybe a couple more. We'll see how it goes as we play out. But let's look at the first one here that I have relating to blood. If you notice here, I got three pictures there, and I'm sure you recognize at least one of them right in the center, right off. The American Red Cross emblem is known probably worldwide. It's interesting that to the left of it is the inverse of it, and that's actually the flag of Switzerland. And then to the right is a poster. We'll talk about that in a second. But look, let's consider some of the history of the Red Cross. And I got this from their website. And these are some of the things that they said. October 1863, the International Red Cross was founded in Geneva, Switzerland by Henry Dunant. And that's why I put the picture of the Swiss flag there, because what they did is they just inverted the colors for the symbol for the Red Cross. Now, some of you might think Clara Barton established the Red Cross, and she did, but it was the American Red Cross that she established. It's a part of the International Red Cross. She established that in May of 1891 in Washington, D.C. So the Red Cross has been around about 30 years before the American Red Cross was. Now, in 1940, the Red Cross blood program began, and this is sometime later, which is sort of interesting to me, because I thought the Red Cross blood program was always a part of the Red Cross, but it wasn't. I know they do more than that, but I thought it sort of started out of that, but that's not the case. They were actually around for quite a bit longer than just as it relates to blood donation. During World War II, the Americans turned to the Red Cross to develop a supply of life-saving blood on a massive scale, and this led to the establishment of the American Red Cross Blood Donor Service. And they collect some 13.3 million pints of blood plasma for use by our armed forces in World War II. So that's quite an accomplishment. And I put up one of the posters there, that one on the right there with the bell. That's one of the posters they put out to try to get people to come in and donate blood. And today they collect 40% of the nation's blood supply, and it's suggested that they support some 3,000 hospitals. And they put on their site, they said 1 pint of human blood can save up to 3 lives. And of course, we appreciate the work the Red Cross does, and it's tremendous. What I'd like to point out is what it says in Leviticus chapter 7, verse 11. It says, "For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your souls, for it is the blood that makes atonement for the soul." Now, this is written by Moses thousands of years ago. How did Moses know this scientific fact? How did he know that? Who told him that? And you might think, well, we all know that. But back then, they didn't know that. How did Moses know that? Who told him? And who told him correctly? We believe that's God. We believe that God is the explanation. It's also interesting, before we go to our next slide here, I notice on the Red Cross they have another domain name that if you just type in givelife.org, it'll take you right to the Red Cross. You know, they had that expression, I can remember when I was younger, give life, give blood. We recognize that principle. That's understood by so many people that it would be difficult to challenge it. But that's what the Bible always said. But society didn't always say that, but the Bible did. And that's important to note. Let's take a look at this next slide here about Of One Blood. The book there is a book from my childhood. I grew up in New Philadelphia, Ohio, and I was good friends with a guy named Bruce. And he had this book, and I read it when we were younger. And I always liked it. And just to give you an idea, it's called The Brave Gives Blood. It's by Philip Miriam Eisenberg. Wrote it in 1954. And I don't have this book, so if you find it across a used bookstore or something, let me know. I like to have a copy of it. I always have appreciated this book. It's basically the story is some young boys go to summer camp together, and the camp counselor was a biology student. And he was also a full-blooded Indian. That's where the term brave comes from his Indian ancestry, not so much his courage, although it would apply as the story would go on. But John, the Indian, he decided a good project for these boys to do would be go out and to map all the different kinds of animal blood. And so that's what they did. And then one of the boys gets injured and requires a blood transfusion. And the only person's type who matches is the brave. The brave gives blood. John, their counselor. And the boys are, they're concerned about that. They're like, well, wait a minute, you're Indian. We're not Indian. And he goes through and he explains, and it's a real good lesson to teach us that, when you peel back the skin, we're all the same. We're all the same. There's no difference. And that's what the Bible teaches us. In Acts chapter 17:26, and he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings. From one blood. And that's important to note. Let's go on and look at this blood types by population. Now, this came from the Red Cross. And if you notice, we recognize we have different blood types. And across the top there, you have different ethnicities. And we recognize that. Although all blood is made from the same basic elements, not all blood is alike. In fact, there are 8 different common blood types, which are determined by the presence or absence of certain antigens, substances that can trigger an immune response if they are foreign to the body. Since some antigens can trigger a patient's immune system to attack the transfused blood, and on and on. It goes from the Red Cross. Blood transfusion is really a fascinating history. I jotted down a couple things. 1628, William Harvey discovers blood circulation. The fact that the blood circulates. They didn't know that before Harvey came around in 1628 and proved it. 1658, Jan Swammerman observes first red blood cells with a microscope. 1665, Richard Lower performs the first successful blood transfusion between a dog and another dog to save the dog's life. They had they were experimenting around because they didn't know exactly what they were doing, and they were putting animal blood into human blood and things like that, and they had some really unfortunate instances occur, so they banned it. They wouldn't let anybody do that for about 150 years, and that set them back quite a ways. But then science caught up. About 1818, James Blumenbell performs the first successful blood transfusion between humans. 1901, Kurt Landsteiner discovered blood groups which made the practice safer. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1930 for that. 1940, Philip Levine is credited with discovering Rh factors. And then 1940, a gentleman by the name of John Elliott, he develops the blood container, the vacuum bottle that we see a lot of times in the World War II movies. He's the one that developed that, and here we go. We're doing this, and, but there's some things we can't tell from a person's blood. There's some things that we just don't realize. For example, we can't tell if they are male or female. We can tell whether they're human or an animal. Matter of fact, it's interesting, they always come up with that right away. Well, we know it's not human blood, but we have to go back to the lab to find out more. They can't tell a lot of things from blood. They can't tell if they're male or female, whether they're educated or uneducated, or rich or poor, or younger and older, unless they have a condition that has impacted their blood supply that would reveal them to be from a certain age group or something like that. But just in general, you cannot tell these things. Why? Because God has made of all nations from one blood. And that's important to note. And that's what the Bible has always said. And before we go, let's take a look at our argument one more time, and we'll just go through this again, see if we can get more into our next episode. But here's our argument. If it's a case that the Bible reveals scientific facts about the universe, earth, nature, and body beyond the writer's ability to realize alone, then that writer has been revealed facts from a mind greater than their mind, the divine mind. And it is a case that the writers of the Bible reveal certain scientific facts about the universe, the earth, and nature, and the body that were beyond the writer's ability to realize alone. And since that is the case, then the Bible writers were revealed from certain facts from a divine mind. And that divine mind is God. So as we conclude up today, we want to talk about the importance of realizing this truth. Not every society, you go through history, you'll read about some of the things that scientists did and things that were outlandish and that they did that we would just think were barbaric today, or just nonsensical. But yet, people still look to the Bible and realize that a lot of the things that the Bible talks about relates to science. And every time it does that, it's accurate. The scientists of our day are still trying to catch up to the truths of the Bible. Thank you very much for watching. Before we close our program today, we'd like to take a moment and review this roadmap to heaven with you, since the matter is so serious. There are many incorrect set of directions out there, and sadly so many people are following them. For example, some people have been given wrong turns. They believe things such as faith only, works only, or grace only. Or some attempt to change the order of the turns, being baptized before they even believe. Some people fail to realize what point they are on the map. Don't even open their Bibles yet, and they think they're saved already. As a person travels in a car or takes a hike, it has to follow the proper directions, so we must follow the proper directions to heaven. Let's take a look at the directions on our roadmap to heaven here. You have to look at these passages in your Bible for yourself. We'll just list the steps, the turns on the way. First is to believe, or to have faith. And then number 2, to repent, to turn away from sin. Number 3 is to confess that Jesus is the Son of God. Number 4 is immersion, or to be baptized, which is a burial in water to have your sins washed away. And then you're added to the church by the Lord, not by a group of people, or not by giving some kind of testimonial experience or things like that. And then once you're added, you need to serve and worship the Lord faithfully all the days of your life. And the key word's faithfully. You don't waver. And that's very important. We need to keep in mind, too, that in Noah's day there was a big flood, and only people in the ark were saved from the flood. The same is true today. There is no salvation outside the Lord's church. Where are you on the roadmap to heaven? Thanks for watching our program. Please let us know if we can assist you with further information for your journey.
In this world